The Sonic franchise is no stranger to killing characters off despite it being geared towards a younger audience. It's something that I've come to really respect over time. Just because something is marketed towards a younger audience doesn't mean that it needs to shy away from more mature tones. The games have always done a fantastic job portraying the emotional toll that the loss of a loved one can cause. Knowing that our favorite characters' lives are on the line makes the thrill of the story so much more engaging, as we can't help but to worry and root for them. And while there are many great stories in the Sonic universe that handle death with gravitas, there are some really odd stories that will leave you scratching your head. To find the main perpetrator of this offense, look no further than the Archie and Fleetway comics. Now look, I love Sonic comics, and I think in recent years the IDW Sonic run has depicted the untimely end of characters in a very compelling way. Whether it be the ambush of the Diamond Cutters, who were set up by their old teammate Mimic, or Dr. Starline losing his mind before being swallowed up by the Earth, these deaths felt like a natural part of the story that advanced plot threads for characters like Surge and Whisper. But the way that death is handled in the older comics had me laughing at how ridiculous they are, but it still kept me engaged, though I don't think in the way that the writers intended. From Charmy B's best friend overdosing to cartoonishly evil villains being trampled by dinosaurs, these deaths are gruesome and hilarious. So join me as we take a look at some of the most bizarre deaths you'll ever see in the Sonic franchise. You know, these comics might honestly be the reason as to why Knuckles is so rough around the edges. This man has seen a lot of death. I'd probably be standoffish too if I'd seen the things that he has. In the good, the bad, and the echidna, the mayor of Backwater City, Boss Crouch, who for some weird reason looks like a Goomba from the original Mario movie, is looking to take out a rooster in order to make himself the main supplier of meat for the city. Yeah, seriously. However, he ends up being tricked by Knuckles and the sheriff into giving a confession, and with that, he takes off with Knuckles in hot pursuit. And like a classic Saturday morning cartoon villain, he begins giving a monologue to Knuckles about how the vial he has is a chemical compound that will attract some weird dinosaur creatures and cause a stampede. And while he's giving this long-winded speech to Knuckles, the ground beneath him gives out. He falls into the Valley of Dinos, and of course the vial shattered during the fall. Crouch can't escape in time, and Knuckles just has to watch on at the horror as the stampede crushes him to death. With the day now saved, Knuckles then takes off on his pterodactyl. You seriously cannot make this up. Knuckles literally just watched this man get juiced and flies away on the pterodactyl like it's a Jurassic Park movie. If that wasn't weird enough for you, this is one of the most bizarre stories I've ever seen. When I was first reading this comic, I was really curious if this was even a Sonic story. From the art alone, it looks like it's a Planet of the Apes story or a Star Trek one. It starts off with this Kraven the Hunter knockoff, and you won't believe what his name is. Yeah, Hunter. His name is literally Hunter the Hunter. Anyways, we open on a shot of him, and the very next thing we see is this big purple ape climbing up to Angel Island. This dude looks like the Mugato from Star Trek. And as the beast reaches the top of Angel Island, we find out that this was once his home, and he harbors hatred for Knuckles. Okay, and I really quickly want to mention this part of the comic because it was killing me. So we cut to Knuckles, and he's reading the book his dad gave him, and it's 2001: A Space Odyssey. Apparently Knuckles believes that this is Echidna Warrior history. I just loved it so much, so I wanted to include it really fast. But back to the important stuff. Knuckles hears that the big grimace looking dude is back, and we learn that his name is Monk. It turns out that this dude used to pick on Knuckles like a schoolyard bully. This behavior had the echidnas fed up, and they tossed him off Angel Island. In the present, the two begin fighting each other, and the hunter arrives. He plans on hunting the two creatures, and I was shook, y'all, because in his trophy room, he has heads of his prey on display, and the hedgehog one legit just looked like Sonic. During the hunt, Monk and Knuckles work together to stop Hunter, and while Monk attacks him, he ends up getting shot and falling to the ground, ending his life. This story just felt really weird. I think the premise would work really well in a Sonic story with someone, you know, hunting down the last echidna and whatnot, but the big purple ape and the knockoff Kraven just did not feel like they belonged in this universe. Maybe it was just the way things were illustrated, I'm not sure, but it was really bizarre. For our last Knuckles story, we go go back to a time of knights and wizards as we find our Echidna friend enslaved by the Enchantress and Black Death. With no free will besides his inner thoughts, Knuckles is forced to serve the two as he bides his time for the right moment to strike. That is until Sir Connery arrives, breaking through the wall like the freaking Kool-Aid Man.
Oh yeah!
This distraction is enough for Knuckles to break free from the spell he was under and join the fight. The wild part about this is that Knuckles and Sir Connery are able to subdue the Enchantress and Black Death pretty easily, and with them beaten and tied up, Sir Connery just pulls his sword out and strikes them down on the spot in the name of his crusade. He really pulled an Anakin on them. Knuckles remains mostly unfazed. I mean, I guess that the Archie and Fleetway characters are just another breed, you know? I've got to admit, part of me feels bad for laughing at this story in particular, but in the Fleetway comics at one point, Robotnik had made a clone of Sonic in order to tarnish his name. Now, this is a plot device that has been used a lot. Mimic has done this in the IDW comics, and of course the government mistakes Shadow for Sonic in Adventure 2. Robotnik says that something went wrong with the experiment, and it caused the clone to age rapidly. So kind of like the clones from Star Wars, but it just cracks me up because you see this geriatric Sonic who's falling asleep and he's wearing red slippers and glasses. Anyways, in this story, he escapes from Robotnik and warns the real Sonic that his friends have been captured. The two of them team up to kick Robotnik's butt, and it's cool seeing the old Sonic running so fast. It kind of reminded me of seeing like Jay Garrick show up in the Flash comics and shows and helping out. And the part that had me rolling was that after they beat Robotnik, the old Sonic clone had used too much energy and he turns all pale and passes away, being turned into pure energy and flying up into the stars. The whole thing is just ridiculous, but it makes me love it so much. It's so lame but funny, and I just love the goofy look of old Sonic. Surprisingly enough, even Amy Rose has blood on her hands in these comics. Going after the Ultra Gem, because apparently they couldn't think of a better name, Amy comes across someone named Xenor Krell. Now, this character tricks Amy into getting the gem so that she can later steal it from her. This gem is so powerful, it can change things on a molecular level. Krell uses it to change the floor into quicksand to stop our two heroes, and even uses it to turn a guardian serpent into mist. Now knowing the power of the gem, Amy tricks Krell into turning the entire castle into polished silver. After doing so, Krell changes her attention back to Amy and her friend and tries to turn them into mist as well, but both dodge out of the way and the wall reflects the shot, turning Krell into mist. Again, it's a really weird little story, and it's even weirder that Amy is wearing an off-color Charlie Brown shirt.
Good grief.
Despite slaying the Enchantress and Black Death pretty easily, Sir Connery would not be horsing around when it came to fighting Mogul. And let me just say, I love his entrance to this fight. The dude's making horse puns and posing like he's Conan. I honestly haven't seen a horse with this much swagger since Mr. Ed. During the intense battle between this jacked horse and a mammoth in a suit, Sir Connery determines that his only chance to destroy the source is to channel his life essence through one final blow. And while he is victorious in achieving his goal, we see that Sir Connery is now nothing more than ash in the wind. I'm a sucker for the Sonic adventure games. I always thought that the elaborate stories they tried to tell were really fun, no matter how the end product actually turned out.
Watch out! You're gonna crash! Ah!
The Fleetway comics actually adapted the Adventure 1 storyline for their run, but of course made some big changes along the way. If you're a fan of the Fleetway comics, you're most likely familiar with Johnny Lightfoot. He's one of the most dependable freedom fighters and a good friend to Sonic. During the Adventure 1 arc, the team would run into Chaos, and it's during this encounter that Johnny would make a move to stop the creature. Chaos would strike the rabbit, however, and it proved to be fatal. After this moment, Sonic would be haunted by Johnny's death, having nightmares about it. It's a darker story than most of our adventures with Sonic, but it shows an interesting side of Sonic where he blames himself for Johnny's death. This next story felt like such a fever dream to me. It's so ridiculous, but treated with the utmost urgency and respect. The story starts off with Harry, a night shift cab driver. Apparently it was a slow night as usual for him until he hears a cry for help. Rushing over to the scene, he sees Charmy be on the ground holding his friend Mello. They rush off to the hospital, and once there, Charmy's friend Mello is taken into the emergency room. Eventually, the rest of the Chaotix arrive to comfort Charmy as he receives the news that Mello didn't make it. We find out through a series of flashbacks that this drug is an epidemic. There's a sauce being produced that is making these victims chemically dependent on it, and eventually they overdose. This story feels like it was part of the DARE campaign.
Now we're saying no to drugs.
It reminded me of when like Jingle Jangle was a drug in Riverdale.
This
is Jingle Jangle.
Since this drug was called Dandelion Sundrop or something like that, I really shouldn't even be surprised though, since these are both Archie properties. You know, it's pretty crazy how many of Sonic's friends ended up suffering a very horrific fate in these older comics. Take for instance Tommy Turtle, a friend of Sally Acorn and a freedom fighter to the end. With his body taken over by Adam, this old turtle is forced to battle Super Sonic. Managing to gain control over his body for a few brief moments, he apologizes to Sonic for the harm he has caused before killing himself by flying into the Egg Fleet, which opened fire on him. Or what about Nate Morgan, a scientist and freedom fighter who has helped Sonic in countless missions? He would eventually be captured by Eggman and roboticized. His untimely end would come when Robotropolis was nuked. And of course there's Espio's old mentor Valdez. He too would be roboticized, leading to a battle between mentor and student, as Espio would be forced to defeat him by tossing him into a river. It's pretty dark stuff, which is understandable given the tone that these comics were going for, but they still feel really weird for a story set in the Sonic universe. The abundance of weird deaths in these comics makes you really wonder what the writers were on when they were penning this. Regardless, they're fun reads, and now I'm hoping that we see the old Sonic clone in an IDW story someday. Let me know what you guys think about these crazy deaths in the Sonic universe in the comments. I really want to know which one you thought was the weirdest. Till then, catch you all next time. Peace.